Hi everyone. Welcome. Hope you had a good weekend. Good to see you all in class tonight. Was anybody able to go over the posts I put on Blackboard as a review for this lesson today? Okay, good. I see some of you had your hands up. Also, the video on Dara Wing Sue. Okay, it was actually an interview, and I thought this would be helpful material to kind of get you ready for what we're going to talk about. So let's go to the slides. So the topic today is going to be on racial microaggressions against Black women in the workforce, and we're going to also discuss gender communications. These are very important topics. I'm very passionate about these topics, as you will see. Only because I have experienced a lot of racial microaggressions while climbing the corporate ladder of success and working in advertising publishing for 30 years and plus. Okay, and unfortunately, discrimination still exists in our society in 2023. Hopefully you will be able to gain some knowledge tonight and know how to respond to microaggressions. Okay, so the topics that we are going to cover, I'm going to make this full screen now. Why I chose the topic. First of all, we'll talk about that, racial microaggressions against Black women in the workforce, and racial microaggressions against Black women in America today is a hidden crisis. People are aware of it. Some people aren't aware of it. And then those that are in authority sometimes kind of like avoid dealing with it. And this is a topic that really does need to be discussed. So the topics that we will cover tonight is: what is racial microaggressions? The history of the phrase. Who coined this particular phrase? How should you respond to microaggressions in the workforce? And then we're going to discuss some of the key findings of the crisis of microaggression. And also, we will discuss gender communication. As I said again, I am so passionate about this topic because of my experience after working in corporate America for 30 plus years, working for Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 company. I experienced microaggression over and over again. Okay, so this is a subject matter that I could really talk about. I'm so passionate about it that it was actually my thesis when I came back to Beirut and to get my degree, my master's, and right here in Beirut College. And it was my thesis, and Beirut enjoyed it so much they published it. Okay, and now it is just going across the country. The reason is because this exists. It shouldn't, but it does. Even though the Equal Opportunity Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is even before my time, this was made to prevent illegal or discrimination acts against a person on the basis of race, color, or religion, or sex, including pregnancy, sexual orientation, and gender identity, or any national origin. Okay, so this is a shame that we are still having to deal with this, but after today, if you do not know what a microaggression is, you will. And this is my reading. The other thing, I want to make sure that you understand that microaggressions, of course, is not just against Black women. That's just my focus as a Black woman and what I wanted to focus on, based on my experience. But as we know, women in general have to fight. Sometimes we have to work twice as hard as men doing the same job in order to make a decent amount of money. Okay, that is discrimination. Right? So we're still dealing with this. So it could be any nationality, but for this review and for this study, I focused on Black women in the workforce. Okay, so let's go on to slide 3. The history of the term microaggression, right, was coined by Dr. Chester M. Pierce. And the reason why, the inability to talk about race, racism, and structural racism led to him deciding to create a term such as microaggressions so that a conversation could be had. So American psychiatrist Dr. Chester Pierce, an African American who coined this term in the 1970s to enable this dialogue around the harm that is causing to non-dominant group, modulated group. He's talking about the minorities, right? And he wanted to be able to, because even as a doctor and a college professor, he still had to deal with this, okay? He was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and also a professor of education. So slide number 4, we're going to talk about some of the key points made by Dr. Pierce. Just going to make this full screen. Microaggressions are categorized in 3 groups: microassault, microinsult, and microinvalidation. So it's a very, very broad topic, but we won't be covering all of that. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. You could do more reading on that. Microaggressions may play a role in the increase in the morbidity and the mortality observed among certain people of low socioeconomical status. So he's saying that it can also cause people's health to go bad, and in some even pass away. Why? It's because microaggressions can often cause people to go into depression. They could cause people sometimes not be able to, it affects their work. Okay? I recall one time someone said a certain slight to one of my co-workers, and I went to the ladies' room and she was in there just bawling, crying. They couldn't hardly they had to go and get her off the floor, where someone had just said something so bad to her, and she wasn't able to work for the rest of the day. So people could sometime, and there's been studies to prove it, we'll talk a little more about that later, that sometimes it causes people's health to go bad and some pass away. All right, so depression is a really big cause of death in our society today. So microaggressions can really do damage. Harmful effects of microaggressions on healthcare providers, right? And also, the strategy for addressing microaggressions includes engaging institutions further in equality. In other words, the place of work. Whoever is the owner there should be encouraging everyone to take action as an upstander and creating an institutional accountability there at that job. I want to say this, I have to give credit. When I was at Walt Disney, one of the things that he had started to do is they would give integrity training annually. And prior to me leaving, they decided that it was much more needed because there was a lot of things going on, and Disney went as far as to say if they find out that people are discriminating against people due to their race, due to their sex, due to their orientation, they would immediately fire you. Okay, so sometimes you have to take action, and the integrity training prove to be a positive thing. So we have a responsibility also as a co-worker, and if you look into the politics of that, you have a responsibility. If you see someone mistreating or being biased towards another person at the job, you should do something about it. Dr. Dara Wing Sue is an author and professor of Columbia University, and other psychologists have further developed a classification system to help people of color to understand what is going on and educate more on the subject of microaggression. And I have to say, he's taken it to another level. So Dr. Pierce coined it. Dr. Wing Sue took the mantle, and he really is just traveling all over and educating people on the subject matter of microaggression. Okay? It's very important for people to gain knowledge. I like to, in almost all of my classes with Education is Power, it is true that there are some people, as Dr. Wing Su said, they are not even aware of what they're doing. And it's very important to understand microaggression is doing a lot of harm. Dr. Wing Su defines microaggressions as the everyday slights. You know, those little words that people say, and the put downs and the insults. They can be intentional, and sometimes they can be unintentional, according to Dr. Wing Su. Sometimes people aren't even aware they are being offensive. A microaggression can be targeted towards any marginalized group based on race, gender, sexuality, and disability. What I want to say, I remember one of my professors in undergrad, and she said something that just an aggression, you can't even classify it as a microaggressions, but those microaggressions that people kind of sneaky with, it's kind of hard to see it going on, and so sometimes people hide it. So we're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, let's just make this full screen here. Dr. Janice Gasman Asser, as it relates to the crisis of bias opinion of Black women and their hair, is something that she said is the lack of information. Okay, she's a best-selling author, and one of the stereotypes persists, and a lot of people, when I first read this, I said, wow, it's very easy to assess this. It sounds very common. It's a commonplace. With Dr. Janice Gasman Asser, as it relates to the crisis of bias opinion of Black women and their hair, it is the lack of information. Best-selling author Dr. Janice Gasman Asser argues that part of the problem is, listen to this, just plain old unaware. Part of the problem and the reason that the stereotype persists is a lack of awareness. So Dr. Janice Gasman Asser, she feels that part of the problem and the reason this stereotype persists is a lack of awareness, as well as a lack of understanding regarding Black women experience in the workplace. There's a common question that I know I've heard this several times. Can I touch your hair? Now, to some of you might think that that's not that bad, and I even had some people tell me that, Marie, oh, they just want to feel your hair. Maybe they've never felt it. Okay, but it's my hair, and also it's not the most cleansing. It's not the most healthy thing for people to be touching folks' hair, right? I had some people say, Marie, oh, would you, and understand that if it's a person that's close to you, right, a person that you work with, that's not so bad. When people just walk up, I've had people just walk up and just already have my hair in their hand. I like to put my braids on during the summer so my scalp can breathe. I have soft but thick hair, and people will walk up and just start holding your hair. It's not the most sanitary thing, but more importantly, if you're put on the spot. That's what I want to say. I remember sitting in a boardroom and someone saying, oh, we have a meeting next week. Are you going to take your hair out? That is so inappropriate on so many levels. And the fact is, now you make me the spectacle. You put me on the spot in front of everybody. And plenty of women was in there. Matter of fact, no one asked anybody else, was they going to take the hair out? So this is bias behavior, and it's really unacceptable. It's not something that should be going on in our society. This is biased behavior, inappropriate on so many levels. Okay? So let's finish this particular slide. Let's make this whole screen again. So let's move on. Dr. Margaret M. Chen, Associate Professor of Sociology at Hunter College Graduate Center, and she argues the model minority is the same as Black women and how they're treated, right? And making them feel like they don't belong on the executive level. Asian women feel that model minority is biased, according to also Dr. Gloria Wong, who is not on the slide. But part of the problem and the reason this stereotype persists is a lack of awareness, as well as a lack of understanding exactly what they are saying and how that feels to Asian women. Okay, there's a misconception of it. I could tell you that one of my best friends, she was born in Hong Kong, and she told me, she said, we don't like that title. And then also, one of the things that Dr. Chen said was that phrase was coined to divide the minorities. So in 1966, there was an article written and published in the newspaper, and this gentleman says, the Asian are proven to be the model minority. Now, what's that? So people hearing it, black people hearing it, thinking like, why are they trying to say that they're better than us? Is that what they're trying to say? But they were saying that they're willing to work for less money, okay, and they don't complain and a lot. Okay, so this was to divide those at that particular time in 1966. A lot of immigrants was coming over into the United States, and there was fear these people are going to take our jobs. So they only allow at that time maybe like doctors and lawyers of Asian descent to be able to even come over, and a lot of them was in some of the research that did. So they made the minorities be fearful, and then putting the other one up but that terminology was not something that they liked. Okay, so the model minority is the same as black women, and they're feeling like they don't belong in a position. Okay, it's important for everyone to know what is the meaning of some of these terminologies that we use. I could tell you, for example, the word ghetto. I just thought that represented where we live, because I grew up in Washington Heights, and but I found out that was a word that was created from the Italians down in the Lower East Side of New York City, and it wasn't positive. Okay, so I choose not to use that word. Before, I just thought they meant like the area, like the neighborhood, but it was putting down minority people. And so we have to be so careful. All of us have biases. And I want to bring to your attention that you are not born with that. You are taught that. These are learned behaviors. And the only one that really can make a difference and change it is yourself. As I've told you before, I have lovely parents. They're ministers and missionaries. But there's some terminologies that they have came and said to me, Marie, thank you for letting us know. Ever since I was little, it was different things that would come up. Guess what I learned today? And then there's some things you don't know that you're doing harm. So that's what's considered a microaggression. The other thing is the fear of the unknown, because you don't know about a situation or different nationalities, different cultures. It's just not okay to just say anything out of your mouth and just be offensive to people, especially not in the workplace. So let's go on to the next slide. In this slide, I'm going to give some examples of microaggressions in the workplace. The New York Times actually did an article talking about microaggressions against women and how it still persists. It's a couple of years ago, and recently they published about sexism, harassment, unequal pay. This is still going on in our society here in 2023. So you need to educate yourself. Those of you that are getting ready to graduate and go out into the world, you need to kind of be prepared. And you know what? I'm not telling people. I had one of my students say, this is getting people riled up. Don't you think it's going to make people extra sensitive? I said, no. What it is doing is opening up their mind to be more open and to be more sensitive. Right? I'm not telling you to walk around with your heart on your chest and running into human resources, but what we need to do, one of the things that Dr. Sue has said, is that we need to have some type of discernment and think about it, how it how it went, what can I have done, and then determine if you need to take it further and go to human resource or talk to someone and see what you could do to change the situation. That's why it's called a hidden crisis. So let's go on to the next slide. Examples of microaggressions. So let's first start with gender microaggressions, which includes sexual objectification, sexual orientation. Not only black women, but all women deal with microaggression on a daily basis. My research was focused on black women in the workplace because of my own experience, as I said before. The use of sexist language, making assumptions based on gender, the use of sexual humor, slights, there go that word again, insults, or using a derogatory analogy. It is not acceptable. You people go to work to learn in a trade or whatever and to make a living. They don't go to work to be harassed and have to be dealing with those little words that maybe it's nothing to you, but it's like really hurting that person. And so it is not something that should be going on. All right. I remember in my early years when I was working, going to the water fountain and having this really tall guy came and bending over my back and saying, well, I'm Jewish, and so I know that you're beautiful. I would love to take you out, but I could never take you home. And this was a person that was in a supervising sort of situation and went on and became a manager. And he did it a few times. It made me feel uneasy, a couple of the other ladies in the office. And eventually I had to say something to get it to stop. That was ridiculous to have to deal with. Another young man came over to me and said, is it true what they say about black women and Puerto Rican women? Are you exotic? That's inappropriate. That's stereotyping people based on their race. It's just outrageous. There's no other way to put it. And I would like to say, if any of you are dealing with that, like I said before, take a discernment. And if it's making you feel really uncomfortable, then you need to go ahead, reach out to Human Resources. Human Resources is there to help us. Also, I want to say, it took me a long time. It took my father. He finally said to me, he said, Marie, your boss doesn't have the last say. And I said, I don't want to lose my job. I like my job. You know what I'm saying? I enjoy my Disney ticket. I do not want to lose my job. My screenings, my children can enjoy the movies and things. And my father said, but you got to open your mouth so it can stop, and do not be fearful. Okay? And so I want to encourage you all in that way. So let's go on to slide number 9. Gender-related microaggressions. Okay? At this point, I want to talk for a moment on sex and gender. What is the difference? A lot of times we get this kind of mixed up, but let's just talk a little bit about this. People often use the term sex and gender interchangeably, but this is incorrect. Sex and gender are different, and it's crucial to understand why. Sex refers to the physical differences between people who are male and female, right? So it's about a biological thing, or intersex. Gender, on the other hand, involves how a person identifies. Unlike a natural sex, gender is not made up of binary forms. Instead, gender is a broad spectrum. How a person decides to express themselves in terms of how they dress, what they like to be referred to. We are a society that has become, I would say, more understanding of LGBTQ, the LGBTQ community. I mean, the reason I say that is because people can now talk more openly about it, and then that way you can understand and how to respond and identify. I like to bring to people attention that sometimes fear of the unknown cause people to be discriminated. They discriminate against people. You haven't even got to know them. Just because you know something about their lifestyle that they've chosen, doesn't give you a right to leave them out. Like some people experience. Someone was just telling me the other day, the whole office going out for dinner and leaving him behind. When they found out that he was a part of the LGBTQ community. So this is incorrect. All right, you're not supposed to discriminate against anyone. Okay, because of the color of their skin, because of their sexual orientation. It's just wrong. These identities may include transgender, non-binary, or gender neutral. There are many other ways in which a person may identify their own gender. I want to say this. I'm learning every day new things at this age. And also, we are living in a society that people, they need to know who they identify with, right? And so this is why a lot of times they just want to be able to classify that. Now, wait a minute now. How do you classify? Well, and people express themselves that way. And I think that is healthy for us to all be educated, like I said. And the things that I'm teaching you today about microaggression, some of you said that you never heard it before. So it's important to talk about these things. So gender also exists as social constructs, right? A gender role or a norm. And that's all based on according to what society considered to be the norm, right? These are social constructed roles, behaviors, and attributes a society considers appropriate for men and women. This is also something that black women and black men have dealt with. I could talk about that. Based on what society decided where we should be able to drink water from a fountain or, before all of that stopped. So why are we still dealing with this in 2023? It still goes on, okay? A person may identify at any point within the spectrum or outside of this entirely. People may identify with genders that are different from their biological sex or with none. These identities may include transgender, non-binary, or gender neutral. There are many other ways in which a person may define their own gender. Gender also exists as a social construct. As gender roles or norms, these are social constructed roles, behaviors, and attributes a society considers appropriate for men and women. Right? So I have to say this. There's things that I had to learn, from my students. There's things that I've learned, even from my sister that works in the hospital. And there's things that I was educated on. It's all right to be able to say, can somebody tell me what this means, so you can understand people a little bit better and also know how to respond to one another. So let's now go on to slide number 10. Gender-related microaggressions. I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. What are some of the common microaggressions against the LGBTQ community? Can anybody share that with me? Okay. All right. Yes. So let's move on. I had a study that several of my students told me they have never heard of this. So I covered this topic of gender-related microaggressions in my class. And they said, Professor, I've just never heard of this before. Okay, so after today, you will know about it, okay? It's healthy to learn new things and to be able to know about people and how we live in our society, right? We're social beings. And at some point, whether it's through your coworker and even within your own families, you will be dealing with these topics, okay? And some of us will have good responses, and some of us that are not educated, we really won't know how to deal with it, okay? So I encourage you to just learn about these things. You don't have to agree with everything to learn about it, right? And every topic to learn about it. But in a society, everyone should be treated equally, okay? I thought about September 11th, A lot of people lost their lives, and there were some people that was in same gender relationships, and they couldn't even get insurance for their loved ones. That's being treated inhumane, right? So let's move on to the next slide. I'm gonna make this big so everybody can see it good, right? See on this sign, on this particular slide, it talks about oppressive acts, right? Derogatory, verbal, microaggressions, hostile, right? Insults, those little subtle tones you walking by that will repeat in some people's heads over and over. Inappropriate behavior. These are called, gender-related microaggressions sometimes. What impact do microaggressions have on the LGBTQ community? Dr. Jess Zanona, a psychiatrist at New York City Presbyterian Medical Wellness Clinic, states microaggressions have the potential of making people feel or believe that they are devalued. Okay? And no one should feel like that, especially if you're in a company and you're proclaiming that it's equal opportunity for everyone. No one should feel devalued, right? They have accumulated effects on one's self-esteem and can breed chronic mistrust, compound the effect of past traumatic discriminatory situation, and be a risk factor to have rates of mental health difficulties, right? Like I said before, it could cause depression. For people who face multiple microaggression related to race, ethnicities, or other identities, these effects can be compounded, and more broadly, all these things have an impact on how people negate health care, right? So no one should be coming to work to feel devalued. You should be coming to work to get your job done, not having to deal with things like this, right? So let's move on to the next slide. How should Black American women respond to microaggressions in the workforce? This right here is really good. Did a little research on this gentleman. I'll make this big. Dr. Kevin Nadal. And he has done a whole lot of research on this, trying to find ways to respond and trying to educate people so they can be prepared in the workplace how to deal with it, right? So I kind of like this little research packet he put together when he said, Dr. Denon, he said, develop a toolkit called the Guide to Responding to Microaggressions. So that's what he established. A tool set is an actual pamphlet or whatever, responding to microaggression. It lists 5 questions to ask yourself when weighing the consequences of responding to a microaggression. Okay. If I respond, could my physical safety be in danger? If I respond, will the person become defensive, and will this lead to an argument? If I respond, how will this affect my relationship with this person in terms of a coworker or even a family member? If I do not respond, will I regret not saying something? I can say I've done that several times. And if I do not respond, does that convey that I accept being or, be the behavior of that person or that statement that they made against me? This is what I mean. In my mother's time, coming up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, they did what we consider to be kind of passive, because they just accepted it, said, well, this is just how it is. No, and then today they would say it is what it is. But back then it was like, we know that we have to go through this. So, and I'm like, yeah, but that's kind of like being passive. Yeah, but if you want to keep your job, then, there was they used to sometimes call me the token, right? And my mother told me, yeah, they used to call me that. And I said, well, I'm glad to be the token. She said she was glad to be the token because she was like the only black person at the job. And I know that there's been a couple of jobs I had where I was the only one in the department. And I had people of upper management walk up to me and say, how does it feel to be the token? That right there is a microaggression, right? Because that's a slight, that's a kind of, he said it with a smile on his face, but it's very condescending, and I really didn't feel good when he said it, okay? There are some people that would take it and laugh it off, but I didn't, right? And so everybody takes things different, but that was not said for my good, okay? He's like, let me know, I hope you appreciate your job. You should be happy. And I was very happy that I had my job. But for him to say, how does it feel to be the token? They're very much aware, and that's why it's called a hidden crisis. Okay? So now let's go on to slide number 13. Right? Some of the research questions. Let me make this nice and big for you. Common research questions about microaggression. How to respond to microaggression. Should you let them comment? You know, make the comments on the slide. Should we just let them do it? Should you let that comment slide every time or address it right on the spot? Right? Is it more harm than it is worth? And I think that's when that discernment kicks in. We have to decide that. Think about it. When do you speak? And when do you seek help? So while I was at Disney Worldwide, I remember Disney had incorporated integrity training. Boy, that was the best thing that happened. And it used to be semi-annually. It used to be annually, but due to the need for it and all of the complaints of harassment that was coming through, they started making it semi-annually, okay, because of the rise of the complaints in the company. But you see the change in the company immediately begin to happen. And we all learned of those hidden biases, all of us, including myself, some things that you're doing and saying while you're working that could be considered offensive. We are social human beings, and it is all about education against racism, homophobia, and aggression in the workforce. I let all my students know Disney wasn't playing. By the time I got ready to leave, they said if they saw any of this going on, you will immediately be fired. And they posted in all of the kitchens so that everybody could see. They were not taking discrimination, biases, no homophobia, none of that. Because if they discovered you was doing that, you was going to get fired. So nobody wanted to lose their job. So you could see the difference in the culture of the company. I mean, Walt Disney Worldwide was a wonderful company, but there's always a couple of bad seeds floating around, right? How to respond. So these are some questions you could think about. Let's go on to the next slide. Microaggressions affects the emotions in your work performance. Like I said before, some people even would become depressed. So Dr. Goodman, a social justice and diversity consultant, said that the process is unfair, but having to decide whether to act is inevitable today, right? The emotional labor should not have to fall on people from marginalized groups. In the real world, people are confronted with microaggression, and people need to decide what to do. Okay? So this is what she said. Let's move on. Those stereotypes, judgment of people based on race, gender, age groups, etc., as implicit biases, people when interaction with various identities, subtle verbal or non-verbal insults. This should not be going on in anybody's job or any corporation. Right? So a research question that was actually published in also the New York Times. Be prepared with what you want to say or do to address negative behavior. Really, talk to somebody about it, right? Sit down and decide which way, as you educate yourself. And some of my students have contacted me. They told me at the end of the semester, thank you so much, because they didn't have a word that they could put it to, but they could relate. And then I had other students that came in of all nationalities. A black young lady said, I never heard of microaggression in my life. I just knew I was being discriminated against. So now you know how to address it. So it's just some things that are just inappropriate. People calling you outside of your name is just inappropriate and incredibly unprofessional. You should not be calling your co-workers, or especially as a supervisor, those that work under you, you don't refer to them as sweetheart. I know we hear this every day, but it's something that women usually don't appreciate, and men don't appreciate it either a lot of times. And the way to stop it is to say, I am not your sweetheart. Because you just refer to me by my name. I've learned to do that. I have a name. My name is Marie. Just call me Marie. Okay? I'm not your sweetheart. And so these behaviors, and a lot of times people don't want to be called the angry person, or like they like to put that crown, the angry black woman, or whatever. Or, Latinos are always mad, and, stuff like that. No, call me by my name. Okay? Don't refer to me as anybody other than myself. That's just having respect for another person. So on slide 21, we're wrapping it up. This is a really, I know it's a big lecture, but you're learning a lot in here, right? Because you want to treat your colleagues and your clients with respect and would not want to insult or demean them. This is one of the reasons that it matters. This is why it matters, right? Because you want a more equitable, you want equality in the office, high performing people, right? No type of biases, right? You don't want them to feel like they're being discriminated against, because you know that diverse teams are higher performing than homogeneous ones, because you want to do what is right. Okay? So on this last slide, I love when I get to the last slide, and I'm sure some of you are like, oh good, she's wrapping it up. But I hope that you take I hope that you have learned a lot about what a microaggression is. Is not something to attack anybody, but it's to educate yourself, and so that you will know how to respond. And if you see someone going through that, be able to go to them and say, how can I help you? Right? Treat everyone the same. Treat everyone like equal. So former First Lady Michelle Obama, she drafted a book. I love this book. I've read it more than once. There is power in allowing yourself, she quotes, to know and be heard. Okay. Former First Lady Michelle Obama drafted a book entitled Becoming. There is power in allowing yourself to be known and heard, and owning your own unique story and using your authentic voice. Furthermore, there is grace in being willing to know and hear others. This, for me, is how we become. Michelle Obama, 2018. So thank you for your time. And now we're going to have Q&A. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer. And just remember, education is power. Thank you.